all have beacons in our pockets that travel with us everywhere. I'm talking about these little devices. They have the capability to know where we go, when we go there, and who do we interact. From the perspective of establishing the possible spread of virus, this is amazing technology, and we already have it. Wouldn't you like to know that your neighbor has COVID-19? Or wouldn't you like to know the person somebody has tested positive and visited the same grocery store that you just went to? So these kinds of things, just for a moment, consider how different the current situation would be if we all had the ability to immediately establish if we had been in the proximity of someone who had since then tested positive. How many of us would have tested earlier, self-isolated earlier, worn a mask, lived? We have GPS, we have Bluetooth, we have cellular, and the fact that we could easily just install a little piece of software and in a matter of seconds, that could make us all work together and humanity's best interest is pretty cool. What's on the table here is, though, refactoring of one of the main ethical dilemmas of contemporary society, privacy versus social security, where the latter is now replaced with health. In a short sight, this is just no-brainer. How could possibly privacy even compete with health? I mean, it's the most fundamental right we have. But of course, there are chief concerns, there are many, many concerns. Amongst the chief concern is privacy. Thinking about it strategically, it's evident that privacy is related to freedom. And why I'm doing this spiel is because I've noticed on Twitter, some of the folks that have been tweeting at me, or I've noticed even my fellow professional, cybersecurity, privacy professional, who cares? I'm just gonna, what is the big deal all about? So here's the thing. We can give away our privacy rights now, but how can we make sure that it's just for fair use? And how will it be regulated after the emergency passes? Will we be forever tied to this kind of control? Lately at XRSI, and I'm sure at several other organizations that care about privacy, such as OpenAir Cloud, and many others watching us live, these questions have remained on top of our minds as we help find this new balance between privacy and data protection during pandemic and future events like this one. I'm Kavya Pearlman. I'm the founder and CEO of XR Safety Initiative, XRSI. XRSI is the first global effort to provide impartial, practical information about emerging technologies related risks to individuals, corporations, governments, universities, and organizations around the world. XRSI develops standards, frameworks, knowledge-based documentation, as well as conduct awareness activities, just like we are doing right now, partnering with global institutions such as Stop Think Connect campaign, National Cybersecurity Alliance, OpenAir Cloud, and ICO universities, and many, many more. I am uniquely positioned, in fact, XRSI is uniquely positioned to address such issues. When it comes to my personal experience, prior to starting XR Safety Initiative, I had combated or mitigated risks with respect to two virtual economies. Some of you might know Linden Lab, makers of Second Life, and another economy or a platform that started, virtual reality platform, was Sensor. So I was tasked to sort of mitigate risks, cybersecurity risks, privacy, and safety risks related to those platforms. Prior to that, I happened to find myself in a very, very unique position where I was working for Facebook, advising them to mitigate risks around third-party security risks in 2016 during US presidential election time. So, and many other experiences, which I'm not going to mention right now, but what I've learned over the course of time is something that puts me in a unique position, and then we have brought tremendous number of experts from all over the globe that a couple of them are actually joining with me. So I'm quite honored to be joined by OpenAir Cloud's Director of Communication, Alina Kadlubsky, and XRSI's Director of Communication, Magnano. All of us, along with our respective teams, have been working closely to help find this balance between privacy and safety and data protection during these very unprecedented times. Welcome, Alina and Marco. Why don't we start with a little intro and your perspective about this current situation? Alina.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Alina Kadlubsky. I'm an art director, product designer, and WebEx art developer by day, and director of communications and chair of the user experience, accessibility, and safety working group of OpenAir Cloud. Just a short, quick intro of what we are about, especially since we are in the midst of the cybersecurity genre, who might not be that familiar with what we do. We, the OpenAir Cloud, are a global nonprofit organization founded in 2018 with the mission to drive the development of open and interoperable spatial computing technology, data, and standards to connect the real and the digital worlds for the benefit of all. And there's only one way to actually fight this pandemic and keeping user data safe by taking a decentralized approach. So thanks, Kavya and Marco. In behalf of the whole OpenAir Cloud team, I'm really honored to discuss today's important topic with all of you. And yeah, next, fire away, Marco.
Yeah, hi everyone, I'm Marco Magnano, and the Director of Communication at the XR Safety Initiative. So we already met on Tuesday when we discussed about XR standards. That was one of the first projects we carried on with XRSI. But let me spend some word about me, please. First of all, I'm located in Italy, so we are experiencing a huge challenge with COVID-19. As you can imagine, we've been the first Western country to cope with the emergency on a large scale. We've been also one of the main labs for this first part of the pandemic. So yeah, we are living a really direct experience. But let me say that I'm not so new with crisis, because in last years I followed from very close the Syrian war and the refugees crisis. I've been all over the Middle East to report it. And this made me more and more convinced that everything needs a balance. And I'm also talking about freedom of speech. That's a byproduct in some way of the environment we build with privacy, security, and ethics, in order to ensure that such disasters like the Syrian war don't take place, because when they start, it's too late. They are already out of control. So this is true for the wars. This is true for health emergency like we are living into. Even if, let me be really clear about this. This is not a war. So all the war rhetorics is absolutely out of this frame. I am following and reporting about this story, I think really since day one, because one of the podcasts I curate weekly is about China politics, China geopolitics, and in January I started interviewing people from Wuhan in the Hebei, the region where everything started, people from Beijing, South Korea, Hong Kong, Singapore, and many more. So the opportunity to join journalism, privacy, cybersecurity, crisis, tech, well, is the reason I'm here tonight. But let's get started.
So thank you, Marco, for that. And absolutely, we have an impeccable team. Marco is a crucial part of it, and that's uniquely positioned in Italy. We have been helping us understand this very unprecedented times and this very new domain in a sense. So before we dig into the contact and proximity tracking related privacy risks, let's zoom out a little bit and see all the privacy aspects that we might need to pay attention during these times. Today, in fact, I'm pretty sure people that are joining us right now are from various different countries. You as an individual, understanding what we are about to share with you or what we are sharing with you, understand it as a representative of your own country. And in fact, you can help make better decisions based on the awareness and the knowledge that you are just about to learn. So zoom out, let's look at all these privacy issues. And then, so this COVID-19 pandemic is challenging the priorities of the organizations around the world. Data protection authorities are handing down guidance to, and HR departments face new employee data challenges. Teleworking has increased data security risks. Healthcare organization needs to quickly share sensitive data, and call for this location tracking are growing louder day by day. This infographic, reference from International Association of Privacy Professionals, breaks down these major topics related to COVID-19 and privacy, a nice overview of all the challenges that we are currently dealing with. As you'll notice in this infographic, the risks are more than just contact tracing. We have risks related to government data collection, virtual learning, remote working, and then, of course, the legal and privacy aspects. As an organization, we have been looking at various aspects of pandemic response and how it impacts our civil liberties. So we found major two categories of use cases. There is the individual use cases. Individuals are concerned about approximately these 5 use cases. So planning trips. Individuals want to know, they want an app to tell them places they can avoid. It's very legit. Proximity alert. They want to know if they're moving into a COVID-19 hotspot, so they could avoid that. Exposure alert. They want to know if they may have been exposed so that they can self-isolate, take preventative measures, wash, sleep, vitamin, hydration, whatever that means, monitor their symptoms, seek treatment in timely manner. Symptom analysis. They want to know either their symptoms are in timeline into a service, so to speak to an expert, or to know whether they're likely to have COVID-19. And finally, the proof of health. As the society comes back online, which we're already starting to see in some countries and certain states here in the United States, they will need to prove that they do not have COVID-19 in order to be the early user of these public spaces. Government use cases. So we are, they're the app-based use cases, extremely useful for the governments in their efforts to protect society from harm. Think about fast contact tracing. When a citizen becomes exposed, they want to quickly inform individuals who have been near that person to self-isolate or to minimize the spread of the disease. This is logical. High-precision self-isolation requests. Self-explanatory. This use case offers this ability for a government to request self-isolation at a more precise level. High precision self-isolation estimation. Now, this is really important so the governments could make pragmatic decisions related to the previous use case, like, health services, to be able to estimate to the degree to which the groups of societies are choosing to self-isolate, the amount of, resources that needs to be allocated. Finally, the high precision symptomatic citizen estimation, similar to the self-isolation estimation use case. This use case involves a government health service seeking to observe what percentage of population is symptomatic, which is a really important number to have. Finally, the proof of health, just like the individual use case. At some point, governments are going to want to start reopening all the institutions in order to protect the economy, and we're already seeing that. However, a major concern that there is a second wave of the disease that could be reignited. One option is, of course, an application which will allow these least likely to be, allow those least likely to be carrying these disease to be able to participate in public spaces, and which involves physical contact, like allowing people to in the gym, dance halls, and, haircuts. I'm sure some of you are probably more concerned than I am. So those kinds of things, absolutely.
But yeah, we need to take a step back, because we cannot state that we need contact tracing if we don't know what is necessary for, in the principle, in the very basis. So all the measures we've seen being implemented all over the world in these months are not for fighting the infection, but they are meant to contain the spread. This is a very different approach, but this is it's the only one we have. The first thing when we face such a big crisis is to flatten the curve of the infection. This means that we have to slow down the contagions in order to avoid that the ICUs, the intensive care, the reanimation, all the high level and high urgency medical interventions surpass the healthcare system capacity. So in general, all the healthcare system must be taken inside of its capacity. So the first move all over the world, we know perfectly this, has been creating social distancing. And almost every country all over the world has been closing down schools, shops, theaters, industries. And social distancing does not only means staying at home. It also means keeping physical distance when you go out on the streets or go to work or go buy groceries. And so the risk is to break down the society by trying to save people. This is a serious problem because shock measures like countrywide lockdowns create many other issues on the social, on the economic one, also on the psychological one. So they can last forever, and this is not good, of course. On the other side, we don't have a cure yet for COVID-19, let alone a vaccine. So even if we discovered a vaccine, it would take long to produce and deliver to everyone. So this is not today, now, and here. And so we must implement more tools to flatten the curve, but trying to keep the society going. One of these is mass testing, and that's useful only in the first stages of an outbreak. And then the other is contact tracing. And so let's move to the next step. Because, yeah, contact tracing goes in that direction, trying to track the chain of personal contacts of a person tested positive to coronavirus. So the idea is to go back to some kind of social life to a certain extent, just like in the introduction we said, without renouncing to contain this wave of spread and maybe prevent the next one, because believe me, there will be next ones. The best way to do this is by using applications on our personal devices, applications that are useful to the general public to report the symptoms and to learn about the virus and the health responses. And applications are now being explored to trace contacts through interaction and proximity analysis. For example, tomorrow, Friday, May the 1st, Apple and Google will release the official APIs for contact tracing applications. So they will not build a dedicated application, but they will release the API to all developers. And so this is an ongoing process, and this is even more interesting to discuss right now. But there are different ways to do this. Let's say there are three main categories, more or less. The first one is to track everything from the social activity of a person, so scanning his or her face when the citizen goes around, tracking the payments, taking data from chats, from social networks. Let's call this the Wuhan approach. And it worked, but let's forget it. It's not applicable to our societies. The second one is the Korean, Taiwan, Singapore approach. That's less invasive, but still it definitely requires something that in Western countries there's not anymore. That it requires a huge degree of trust between institutions and citizens. But yeah, in Europe and United States, this kind of trust is not something we have today. The third one is a mixed model. Many government agencies are trying to do so by collecting and analyzing personal information about large numbers of identifiable people, but trying to keep some kind of balances, check and balances. But we use health data, travel, personal relationships, sometimes buying data from who already has it, just like it's done for advertising or politics. This has been done especially in the first stages of this crisis. But all these approaches have huge risks. So here we come to the only way we can really stand, the tracking of proximity, alias contact tracing, and the principles we must adhere to. And let's move to these principles. And also here, we have to, again, start from a general consideration. It is normal in these exceptional times to have exceptional tools. Why? I'm saying this because contagion and illness implies repercussions on the collective health, so the collective interest, where data protection is considered by the most advanced regulations a right of the individual. Let's keep in mind this because it's very crucial. That's why, again, special conditions apply. However, we need to weigh the risk at stake because the dissemination of the health data that also comprehends, for example, false negatives and false positives. Never forget this because we can also mislead the behavior of an individual. can have particularly discriminatory consequences on the individual and the families. So the most advanced data protections laws in the world, such as GDPR for Europe, take into account that in exceptional cases like the one we are living, it's possible to make data collection easier. So also this is a possibility, but all this must abide to some clear principles. First of all, the collection, use, and retention of personal data must be adequate, must be necessary, and must be proportionate. A software that collects large-scale and identifiable information about people must be justified by public health experts for the purpose of containment and for the purpose only. And the purposes must be specific enough to exclude further processing for purposes unrelated to the management of the COVID-19 health crisis, like commercial or law enforcement principles. We cannot build a control system right now. Then, as I said, the current health crisis should not be used as an opportunity to establish disproportionate data retention mandates. For example, yesterday, Italy ruled about the contact tracing application, and they decided that the last term to keep this data is 31st of December 2020. So we have a clear term for data retention. Storage limitation should consider the true needs and the medical relevance, and personal data should be kept only for the duration of the COVID-19 crisis. Afterward, for a general rule, all personal data should be erased or anonymized if they are not anonymized before, during the processing. Let me say this boldly. The respect for this principle plays a central role in modern democracy, and they will shape the way we will live our new normal. Let's take an example, just to wrap up. Keeping on our servers 5 years of travel history of all people would not be proportionate to the need to contain a disease like COVID-19 that hopefully has an incubation period of 2 weeks and an horizon of months, not 5 years. This is true also for the measures themselves. The infrastructure of surveillance we're building should not outlive the crisis it is intended to address. It must be, again, adequate, proportionate, and necessary.
While there are quite a few privacy concerns, privacy aspects that have the potential to be abused, a few that remain on top of our minds as we perform some of these reviews, present advice to some of the regulators and developers are as follows. Discrimination. And Marco already hinted at that. There is a historical precedent for improper government containment efforts driven by bias based on nationality, ethnicity, religion, and of race, rather than facts about a particular individual's actual likelihood of contracting an illness, which, such as their travel history or contact with their potentially infected people. We've seen very similar discrimination being played out against people of Chinese descent. So the next one, transparency. When we have the need to move fast, the chances of forgetting this principle are very high because we need to move fast. Any government that uses large-scale data to track this virus spread should be clearly explained to public. This includes the publication of detailed information about the information being gathered, the retention of period of data, just like we heard in Italy, they have made it clear in Italy, the tools used to process them, and the way these tools guide the public health decisions. Proportionality. A software that collects this large-scale identifiable information about people must be justified and deemed necessary by public health experts for the purpose of containment. And the data processing must be proportionate to the need. Proportionality applies to the measures themselves. A data surveillance infrastructure we're going to build in these months should not outlive the crisis it is intended to address. Abuse and misuse. Entities that are collecting data specific to COVID-19 crisis, such as information about individuals who are searching for testing centers or information about the disease, they must not be able to use this data for any other purposes. The data must not be, for example, be combined with some kind of a behavioral targeting data to train some kind of a machine learning algorithm or to improve advertising. Let us also not forget the malicious actors. They are already targeting several organizations. We have seen over 400% increase. Actually, we saw that number was recorded a few weeks ago. 400% increase in phishing activities. So these malicious organizations are trying to, malicious individuals are targeting these organizations to try to get their hands on this sensitive health data and location data. And therefore, security is going to be essential. While we advise and advocate the use of privacy-preserving technology, one of the approaches that we rely on for long-term solution to privacy is decentralization. There still needs to be some exchange of data, either to submit your own positive status or to be notified to your exposure, but it does not need to be, it needs to be masses of info on it doesn't need to be like a masses of info on a centralized system. To speak to us more about this, let me hand over to Alina, who we know is a huge advocate of this approach. Alina.
Sure, thanks, Kavya. After the short intro I gave you a bit in the beginning, I bet you all want to know a bit more about what we, the OpenAir Cloud, are about, especially those who might not be familiar with us on the first hand. So no worries, we've put everything you need to know in a short little video. So let's have a look. So yeah, we, the OpenAir Cloud, encourage approaches, standards, and best practices that will bring the greatest benefit to all, while also avoiding potential threats to privacy, security, and safety. That's what you see on the slide. So that's why we're currently building the reference implementation of the core pieces of an open and interoperable spatial computing platform for the real world. This, we believe, is the best way to achieve the vision of what many refer to as the mirror world or the spatial web. So you may now ask yourself what this has to do with the coronavirus pandemic, right? So currently, thousands of apps that we heard beforehand by Kavya and Marco already are currently thousands of apps and various other solutions are being developed, especially regarding on the topic of contact tracing, which could end up giving governments new surveillance and data gathering powers, especially when these powers remain in place after the pandemic has subsided. So that's why we need to have some serious debate and discussion about this. But there's another solution to bring it under control. Yes, we must act in the same manner, so speed and international cooperations are essential to protect health, privacy, and the economy. So that's why various European researchers and institutions joined forces under the Pan-European organization with exactly this goal, to build an interoperable underlying tech solution with the enforcement of data protection, anonymization, GDPR compliance, and security, and is currently actually being implemented by around 50 countries. So, but this is only one solution. There are not millions, but I bet a couple of dozens out there who are also taking the same approach from more of an open, independent, decentralized perspective.
Yep. So thank you, Alina. And, that's absolutely. So when we were sort of developing some of these thought processes and forming our own opinion around advocacy, we really consulted, OpenAir Cloud and sort of established that these are some of the technologies that we should think of as we advise. So in order to help achieve this balance between privacy and pandemic response, XRSI is currently offering free privacy review. So if you are working on an app, a web app, or any other piece of technology that will be using any sort of user data, COVID-19 rapid response, we're offering advice on implementing privacy-preserving features. If you're a regulator or a decision maker who isn't sure what standard should be put in place for these emergency-focused apps, we are providing expertise and guidance. As an expert in the domain, if you are one, please join us to help this global community fight the pandemic without having to sell off all these data protection right forever. So for that, you can go to XRSI.org, www.xrsi.org, and sign up to either get a privacy review, consultation on finding the right balance between the privacy aspects of COVID-19 response, or help us conduct the reviews as well. We're a very small nonprofit. We rely on donations and grants for funding. That's why we are very, very thankful to Saya University for their contribution to help run this program as a free resource to maintain the balance between privacy and data protection. And here are some resources that we curated thanks to OpenAir Cloud, who has been consistently an advocate as well as a huge resource to help us find this balance. So the first link is for the privacy review pandemic response. Fairly recently, I recorded a podcast, which is just a 15-minute nugget to talk about the exact same thing, why there is a need for privacy while we do this COVID-19 response. And of course, OpenAirCloud.org, our strategic ally from the very beginning when XRSI was founded, PEP-PT.org, this is the pan-European solution being adopted by now probably over 50 countries. Then there is other recommendation, it's a PDF put together by European authorities, privacyinternational.org. They are tracking all the examples. This particular link will allow you to see what's happening around the world with respect to these apps. So really important for us to just kind of like keep an eye on all these technologies being developed. And finally, the ICO of UK, what are their recommendations for the COVID-19 response? So with that, I would say thank you, everyone. And we are very glad that we had this discussion. I would like to just, hand over to you, Alina and Marco. Any last words, please, and everyone, please follow us on Twitter, connect with us, and we are here to help. Alina, any last words?
Thank you very much. And well, there is one question that emerged in the chat during our presentation, and I just like to take from there because a couple of users asked, well, what's the right term for data retention? Because if, as I said, there will be a second wave of contagion, a second wave, a third wave, who knows? Because it depends on the management. And yeah, we have some very good examples, and we have some very bad examples of management and very unordered management. But well, the point is that contact tracing is about contacts, is about proximity alerts and proximity chain. So given that we have a more or less determined incubation period of 2 weeks, and that the contagion doesn't last forever in the body. Okay, we still don't know how long the antibodies will stay in the body after the contagion, but this is another point. But we cannot. It is useless. It's not only dangerous, but it's useless to retain data of people for 5 years when we are talking about something that will be useful for 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Then you have to keep tracing contacts. This is a good practice. If everything keeps being private and secure, like the European Data Protection Board states. Otherwise, yeah, keeping 5 years of my contacts, well, okay, you can keep them because they are anonymized given the directive, but they are totally useless because if I met you 5 years ago, okay, probably you are not the cause why I got infected in 2025. So yeah, you wasted a lot of database space just for following me, and this is not a great thing. Okay, this said, thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure, and thank you to CEA University and to CEA Cybersecurity Awareness Tour for having us, for discussing about all these great topics, and to, well, having done a great job at every level. Alina, any last word from you?
Yeah, thanks Kavya and Marco for giving us the opportunity to join you on this amazing, very highly important topic. And I think there are ways of tracing people and blurring the data that you don't need without surveilling the end user and keeping their data safe. There are solutions out there, and I think it's just too much a risk that various countries take by using this bad situation we are all in just as an excuse to gather data from people. And yeah. Thanks, Saya. Thanks, Jonathan, Claire, for this amazing 4 days. It's been really insightful, and yeah.
All right.
It.
With that,
have a great day, a great night, a great 1st of May, the Labor World Day. That it's coming in a very unfortunate moment, but it's really something we have to keep in mind globally because, well, it's a right. And it's something that all over the world has been fought a lot to be a right. So let's celebrate in this 1st of May that's coming.
thank you all.